What's up, guys? Starting a train log for my prep in the Canadian Nationals 2025. In this train log, I'll be going over my program. I'll show each day on the screen so you can see what I'm doing. And in these videos, I'll talk about how the week went and explain the why behind the program more in depth. Want to hear from you guys what exactly you'd like to hear about the program, as there's lots I could say, so comment below and I'll go over it in future parts. So this week is my third week after my last meet, and typically after a meet, I feel a good bit weaker. There's the fatigue in the meet itself, and also the deload before the meet means you're not getting a lot of stimulus, so you tend to detrain a bit as well. Usually takes me a few weeks to start feeling fluid again, and this week is when that really started. It's why I typically advise people when first coming back from max out or after a bit of time off from the gym to not actually use any cues. This may sound counterintuitive, but sometimes you just need to let your body do what feels natural, get that basic groove back, and let muscle memory kick in. Now, as for my program itself, I only made a few changes lately. I like making a few changes at a time so you can see what is or isn't working. One change is for my secondary squat and deadlift days, Monday and Tuesday. I'm using more load-limiting variations to get less fatigue. On squats, I'm doing high bar alongside the pause I was already doing. On deadlifts, I was already doing pauses to limit load, but also just going lighter on the load than I typically did before, taking it down by 10 kilos versus where I usually start a cycle. This basically just gets me a bit less fatigue from the work and makes things more sustainable. Just was noting that I was constantly fatigued in my posterior chain, especially in my glutes. And the other change I've made, I've mentioned it recently, how for the first time in over 10 years of powerlifting, I'm using machines on the lower body, leg extensions on squat days, hamstring curls on deadlift days. In the past, I could handle a lot of squat and deadlift volume, but as I've gotten stronger, more fatigue, as I mentioned, particularly in the glutes. So to ensure my other muscles are getting enough work, I'm doing this isolation work. This is what I do typically for anybody who cannot handle a lot of squat and deadlift volume, people who are bigger and or have more absolute strength, or people who have injuries that may just limit them a bit for a lift. Now, you might have noticed on the accessory work there, I didn't actually put a rep range. This is because basically how I see isolation work for powerlifting. The point is hypertrophy, and the actual weight we lift doesn't matter like it does with strength, where that is the direct outcome. What matters is the proximity to failure. That is the real stimulus. So I have a certain rep range, let's say 6 to 8 reps. I start at a weight I can do the low end of the rep range. I'll fail at 6 reps. Once I can get 8 reps consistently, I'll reset with more weight back to what gets me to 6 reps. That's just a real simple way to progress accessories. And the rep range I use varies by how easy the exercise is to cheat. So something like rows or lateral raises where it's easier to get your full body momentum helping, I'm going to do higher reps. This means more of the reps earlier in the set are easy, and thus I can be more strict. Something like triceps extensions where it's pretty easy to be strict, just gotta focus on that elbow position. I'll go with lower reps and a bit heavier. There's some evidence that higher rep ranges are more fatiguing, so I try to use the lowest rep range where I can have what I view as an acceptable level of strictness. I do think a little bit of cheating on accessory work can be okay too. First off, there's evidence, I'll link studies below to claims I make in these videos, by the way. Anyways, there's evidence that forced reps after failure like this can be more beneficial, but also the way I see it is like this. Assuming we accept working at or near failure is better for hypertrophy, your motor cortex doesn't care about isolating a certain muscle, it just wants to complete the movement by using whatever muscles it can. So if you're pushing yourself towards true failure, your muscle you're trying to isolate is going to fatigue, and your motor cortex is going to use other muscles to help, aka cheat. So if you're truly working at failure, I think you're going to have a bit of cheating at the end of your sets. So that's the end of the training log portion of the video. There's a lot more I can talk about obviously, but I want to hear what you guys in particular want to hear, so comment below again. Next, I'll go over a few Q&A questions I've gathered over the week. You can also comment questions down below, I'll go over them in next week's video. So anyways, question 1. How strong do you think an average person can get to naturally? So I'm going to use DOTS score, which is strength relative to body weight score. For reference, my best DOTS in competition is 524. The best natural lifters are around the 600 mark. People talk about the role of genetics, but I think it doesn't really matter until you dial in everything else. If you dedicate your entire life to lifting, I really think you can get to a 500 DOTS. It might take a decade or longer of progress. It might sacrifice a lot of things as well, religiously following diets, sleep, and of course the actual lifting. And you want to get good programming as well, either from yourself or a good coach. If you can do all of these, you can make insane progress, but a more realistic target I think would be a mid 400 slots for a more average level of dedication. The point being, I think the average person is a lot more limited by how dedicated they are to lifting, not genetics, and fair enough. How many people want to make their entire life revolve around lifting? Question number 2. What were the things that best helped your squat? So 1, gaining weight. Filling out your frame really makes a difference in your squat leverages and also lets you extend your back better against the resistance. As for technique, the main thing is mastering your transition into and out of the hole. Really find a way to get the best bounce you can to propel yourself through the sticking point just above parallel. This means ascending as fast as you can, with control, ideally with good speed though. Keep balanced over midfoot while you descend. Get that good bounce and not have a rapid change in position as you come out of the hole, aka a good morning squat. Usually the answer to this is bending over more in ascent, rather than trying to stay upright like most people think. So question number 3, how does my program differ from my clients? The short answer is the basics are pretty applied across the board, there are going to be similarities, and the general principles I use are going to lead to some similar looking programs. But the longer answer is, this might be a bit of a hot take too, especially in powerlifting where everybody thinks you have to find the absolute most personalized thing. I think people and their programs' needs are much more similar than most assume. A lot of people are just bad at distinguishing what does or doesn't work for them. Lifting progress is a result of a lot of moving parts, and it can be hard to pin down what exactly is or isn't helping your progress. On top of that, we usually aren't talking about the difference between something that works amazingly and something that is terrible. We're usually talking about comparing two things that both can be successful and have a slight difference at best. It's easy to think that something is optimal because it is working, but just because it works doesn't mean it couldn't work better. Anyways, covering the basics is about 80% of the progress. Getting to the extremes levels of dedication is about the next 10%, getting you to that 90%. And the last 10% is going to be the real individualizing all the tiny details. Now, question number 4. Do you think powerlifters need to train the core? No, engagement of the core muscles is really low compared to actual core exercises. You don't need to actually strengthen them though, but I doubt that's ever going to be a negative if you want to train it, unless you're really killing yourself fatigue-wise with a ton of ab work. But what you do need to know is how to brace properly and use that core effectively. That's something completely different than actually strengthening it though. Question number 5, what's the most underrated exercise? So I made a recent video in which I talked about adductor work. That's ADD, not ABD. I know it can be hard to hear the difference. Things like the good girl machine or Copenhagen side planks are good to work this. It's a very important muscle for both squats and deadlifts. I also think in more modern powerlifting circles, front squats get a bad rap for being limited by the upper back. I do think that is a strength though. Working that can allow more forward lean without chest collapsing on squats. That leads to more posterior chain engagement for more musculature involved in your squat and thus more weight lifted. Question number 6, why is submaximal strength training more effective? So there's some theoretical research on this. Basically on submaximal work, we can recruit more muscle fibers because they're not as fatigued. This is like a 1 rep max where we're going to be recruiting basically all the muscle fibers we can. Data-driven strength has more on this topic. I'll link that below along with the other stuff as I said. It's also pretty well demonstrated in motor learning that the volume of skill practice is important. So with submaximal intensities, we can do more total skill practice. Skill practice is just one aspect of strength though. Submaximal work may be better as it allows us to get more of it in. Question number 8, what do you think of conjugate? I think it doesn't work very well for raw, natural lifters. There's a reason you never see an IPF world champ doing it. That being said, I still think it can work. Most things can work if you work hard. I think in terms of impact on powerlifting programming, nothing has been more foundational. Anyways, thanks for watching guys, that's the video. Like I said, please comment more questions below and what you want to hear about my program. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And once again, thanks for watching.